I believe that there are testimonies that should not be shared in church, around church, and so on, because it has not just made believers useless, but it has reduced them to be not good leaders, even in the marketplace. While I was in school, especially in the university, I have heard a lot of such testimonies. Like a believer will come and say, this course I did not read. I didn't read this course, but by the grace of God, I have passed. And people will clap, clap, clap. For me, it's a disgrace. It's a pure disgrace. Because somebody is not reading and is sharing as a testimony to say that it is by the grace of God I have succeeded in this course, even though I did not read. It sounds nice, but it's a terrible thing because you are not a good representative of God, especially as a leader. How are you not reading and you are passing? Let me quote you a good example. Imagine that you go to the hospital and somebody who is sitting in front of you is a doctor or call himself a doctor and wants to operate you. You ask him that, how did you become a doctor? Says, I was going to school, I was not even reading, but by the grace of God, today I'm a doctor. Will you sit there and listen to that kind of advice or listen to what that doctor is going to prescribe? You will not. Or imagine somebody maybe says, I am a pilot, and you hear that the person has been passing exams, though he was not sitting in class, but by the grace of God, he was able to achieve tremendous success. Can you enter that kind of plane? You will not. Because many people have abused the grace of God. They think that the grace of God means you should not do work. But Apostle Paul says in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 15, that by the grace of God, I labor more than ye all. If you are a true believer in the marketplace, a leader that you want people to emulate to, you must show by your works. Grace is shown by works, not by talks. Grace is shown by works. So you cannot say by the grace of God, I just succeeded, I just passed. No. In fact, by the grace of God, we should see more skills, more diligence, how you apply that particular diligence. So keep sharing, when you keep sharing testimonies that you were lazy, that you were even supposed to be flogged, you're supposed to be beaten, and people are clapping, it's a disgrace. That is why we call the grace of God supernatural. Supernatural. It means that it is natural mixing with super. You must bring your own skills, bring your own diligence, and now God will begin to now work on that diligence that you have brought. That is what we call grace. It is not you bringing laziness for God to endorse. So if a pilot maybe gets a plane and pilots a plane and lands somewhere, if you ask him, you say, I've landed by the grace of God, which is true. Now, if you now ask somebody to come and enter that you didn't learn, and they ask you that how you're going to pilot this plane, you say, I'm going to pilot it by the grace of God. Nobody is going to enter there because grace is shown by skills. Grace is shown by diligence. So, if you are a true believer and you want to represent God, stop this laziness that you keep saying, by the grace of God, I'm going to make this. Or if you are saying like that you are saying that I'm going to be diligent, I'm going to be committed, is different. But if you are saying that I'm going to just be lazy, I don't know how it's going to happen. There is nobody, no leader in the Bible, none. You cannot quote anyone who, if you ask him that, how did you succeed? You just say, I succeeded by the grace of God, just to mystify it. No, people can explain. They can explain how they succeeded. And that is how, if you want to represent God, you must be diligent. You must be somebody that you can explain that God helped me, but this is how I can explain that this is what I did to succeed. And so I want to admonish you that don't abuse the grace of God. If you truly have grace, it will be shown by how diligent you are, how skillful you are, the result that you have as a product of that grace. So stop sharing such kind of testimonies because they are not testimonies. They are a proof that you are not diligent. They are a proof that you are lazy. And if you are lazy, you cannot represent God. If you are lazy, you are not a leader. So I want you to be diligent as from today and commit yourself. Know that whatever you are doing as a skill, whatever you are doing as work is how you represent God. Just recently, I shared some lessons on what I got from after planning my wedding and so on. And I got a feedback from a message that got me so amazed. I was talking about tellers and some of the lessons I learned, the disappointments and so on. I received a comment today that got me so worried. Somebody said he gave their dress, a wedding dress, to two tellers, and all of them disappointed. They came back with disappointment. In fact, they had to buy the dress early in the morning that the wedding was starting at 11 o'clock. And imagine that that one is a believer and you are saying that you are doing it by the grace of God. It's a disgrace. So if you are diligent, you are serious, you are competent, that is grace. That is grace at work. So grace is shown by the works and the diligence in what you do. So I want you to go out there and be a great leader and represent God well. Thank you very much. And do subscribe if you want to get content like this so that you can always be notified when content like this is dropped here. Thank you.